Good morning for those that are just joining in now. If you want to say a quick hello in the chat, actually, that's always super nice. Whereabouts maybe you're calling in from? How are you doing today? What is the time where you are? I have a very brisk 8 a.m. in the UK. They're running up. Maybe we have a few Americans in as well. Okay, we've also got some very hot places going on. Nice bit of Alicante in Spain. Going to say some from some friends in Berlin. They are currently sliding around on ice everywhere. So I think they would much appreciate some of that warm weather. Some cloudiness, Romania. Wow. 4 p.m. Thank you very much for going strong then into the evening with us. From Sofia, Romania. Brilliant. Keep it coming. From Paris as well. Very lovely. From Bulgaria, from Varna. Sounds good. And I love the description as well. Might have to put it on a travel plan. Croatia, Bulgaria. Perfect. We'll just give it another minute or two for everybody to get settled. If you're just joining us, we're just saying a quick hello in the chats. Whereabouts are you coming in from? Where are you joining this call from? We'll be starting up in just a moment or so. Feel welcome to grab yourself a cup of tea or a glass of water or whatever your best preference is this morning. Joe from Berlin, from Geneva, wonderful. From Tirana as well, brilliant. Hello, hello. Some great emojis coming up also. Okay. Perfect. I think at that time, then we can start to get ourselves into this webinar mood. Thank you so much for joining us this morning or afternoon, wherever about you're based, for this webinar called Beyond the Headlines, Tools and Skills to Detect Disinformation in the News. So to give a first kind of couple words on this, I'd love to also hand over to my fellow host for today, EACEA, who is the project lead for Read Twice, and she's excited to tell you a little bit more about why we're here. EACEA, go for it.
Hi, George. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear and see me well, at least now. Yes, great. Thank you to everybody who managed to be here with us despite such an early hour. I hope you have a meaningful experience. So to start off today, I thought that it makes sense to tell you a little bit about the project that is bringing us here, because today's webinar is part of a larger effort to tackle disinformation that we from EuroAdvance, my association, with another 4 organizations from around Europe are making for the past 16 months or so. So in the next few minutes, I want to tell you a little bit about this project. So just let me share my screen. I hope I will manage to do this quickly. Just a second. This one. You should be able to see it right now. Yes, great. So the project is called Read Twice, and today is one of the final events of the project. It's implemented by us as a lead project from Euro Advanced Association. We're based in Sofia. We were founded some 10 years ago, and we mostly work to promote the development of civil society, to cultivate democratic values and principles. Our most prominent projects are in the field of communication, media literacy, digital transformation, but we're probably most famous for this portal, themayor.eu. That we use to promote the cool things that happen at the local level, at the regional level. We feature very nice initiatives and positive examples on how the EU cities can tackle the challenges of today and how the European collaboration cooperation is enhancing it. You can go to the portal using the QR code or the website that you can see on your screen. And the cool thing about it is that it's interactive. So if you happen to notice or know about some interesting project or initiative from your city that you want to tell us about and that you want to see in other cities across Europe, don't hesitate to send us a message and you share your views over there. But why read twice? Since you're all here today, a little less than 40 people, it means that you're already well aware what disinformation represents and why it can threaten our democracies, what the impact of fake news, as we popularly call disinformation today, why it can be super impactful to our democratic societies. And we wanted to teach people how to assess critically content, especially online, as one of the ways to tackle disinformation. Therefore, the objective of the project are to counter disinformation, to limit the spread of fake news, and by enhancing citizen skills to assess critical information. And our target groups are mostly primary young media professionals, but also generally young people, local stakeholders, the civil society, among others. So the project, as I said, is almost in it's actually in its final phase. We will have a final event next year in Brussels to conclude it, but it's our very final event today, and we have already completed a lot of activities in several stages, and I would like to tell you a few things about them. But why? Now, why did we decide to set up the project this way? You can see on my screen a map that I have entitled Disinformation Vulnerability in the EU. The map is taken from the so-called Media Literacy Index from last year. It's issued by Open Society Institute in Sofia, and it's a regular piece of scientific work. And it consistently shows one thing. There are some countries that are doing and ranking pretty well in terms of disinformation, in terms of tackling disinformation, and there are clusters in Europe that are not doing so well. You can see that, unfortunately, my country, Bulgaria, is doing worst in the EU, while some countries, luckily we have representatives of them only in the very first panel, and I hope they will tell us a little bit more about how things work there, such as Finland, are doing well. I'm not going to dive deeper into this index. I'm going to put it, in case you haven't heard of it or you want to get more familiar with it, I have put it in the sources of my slides today. But just to show you, like, visually what Europe represents today in terms of disinformation readiness, in terms of readiness to tackle disinformation. So with this partnership, we wanted to a little bit combine partners from parts of Europe that are not doing so well in terms of disinformation and from parts of Europe that are doing well, and to form a complementary partnership and see how we can help each other. So that's the partnership. Us, as I said, we also have two associations from Croatia, that's Udruga Eco, from Romania, Sepoate, and from the other part of Europe, Portugal, the University of Lusophona, and Alliance for Europe. With you, George, today. Thank you for co-hosting this event. So our activities unfolded in stages, as I said. As a first stage, we gathered a group of very nice and motivated young media professionals from Croatia, Romania and Bulgaria. That will be around 30 people, and we took them to capacity building trainings, because media literacy and disinformation is not actually taught here. So we needed to build capacity, and especially in this group, young media professionals who have really influence and impact among larger parts of society, being communicators. So we took them to Western Europe, to Germany, and to Portugal to form their capacity, to get them familiar with the processes of fact-checking and with the latest tools and procedures. They met very interesting and very good professionals. They went to Der Spiegel, to Radio Nova, to Publico in their offices, and learned firsthand how a professional, a big media outlet operates and produces its piece of news. And they had very, very practical activities over there. As a second stage, they returned to their home countries, and they turned into teachers, into trainers themselves. So the idea was for them to spread the knowledge and the skills that they have gathered in these capacity buildings, and to become trainers to their peers, actually. So you can see some of the pictures of some of the trainings that we had in Sofia. And we believe that they turned out very well, because these 30 people managed to train over 450 other young people in these countries, with almost without any interference from teachers, from professors, from us as organizations. So it was very, very organic. And I think the impact was pretty good. And then as a third stage, we had some local activities, of course, to engage the stakeholders, other groups of stakeholders and civil societies, which had three events in these three countries. And now we are in the international stage of it twice. You can see, of course, today's webinar, but also we have a social media campaign. So if you want to be part of the conversation and to share your story related to disinformation, or something like feedback, what do you do, how do you tackle it, and what worries you the most, just simply use this hashtag and tell us about it. During the entire duration of the project, we've also had this horizontal activity of young people writing articles on disinformation and fake news, and it gave them the chance to explore different angles, different aspects of the problem, depending on their own interests and views, and focusing mostly on the topics that are most relevant to where they come from. And also during this process, they have been entered, they have been advised by our experienced editors, and they gave them the chance to either build, or for some people create their journalistic portfolio, so to become published authors online and to get their names published, and you can see it here. Also, we have some documents that you might wish to see on the project webpage. Our partners from Alliance for Europe, and for Lusophone University prepared the best practices mappings to show us how their countries are tackling disinformation and media literacy in particular. So you can see some of the most interesting initiatives in these two countries. And also on the other hand side, you can see that we've done media literacy and disinformation response readiness analysis in Bulgaria, Croatia, and Romania, to tell you what the situation of media literacy training is and what different stakeholders need as regards for it. So you can download and check these documents online. But to conclude my slides, once again, I'm getting back to one of our participants, Mila, who was back then a student, but now she's accomplished and a very successful communication professional. And I just wanted to share what her feedback with regards to the project was. So she told us that before the first event of the project, she was feeling demotivated, lost, and confused. But when she met so many young people, all of them with different backgrounds, coming from different countries, but despite all of the differences, they shared the passion to build a better society. This really changed things for her, and I would like to repeat these a little bit flattering words for what we've been doing so far. She's feeling inspired. It has been an encouraging and unforgettable experience for her. Thank you very much, Mia, for these nice words. And that will be all for me, just in case you want to check the project. This will be our contact details, and these will be my sources. Thank you very much. I hope before really giving the floor back to George, I would like to wish you a wonderful day today. Thank you for being here. In case you want to get familiar and want to ask something more about the project, don't hesitate. Thanks a lot. George, getting back to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Yesenia. And I see that Mila is actually also in this webinar as well. So thank you so much to you, and also to all of the others that joined these sessions in Berlin, in Porto, and outside of that. Indeed, it was very inspiring to see how the communities can come together and kind of be the best mouthpiece for themselves. So to kick off, I wanted to go a little bit into what the agenda is today and what kind of objectives we want to come out of. The goals, as Yesenia just went through, of the project is so much about empowering communities to be able to build up their own media literacy resilience towards disinformation. So this comes through training of trainers and building up people that are in the center of communities that can reach out further. The way that today will run, then we'll do a little warm up and get our heads in the right space and start being able to connect with each other. We then have three great panels on three different areas around disinformation, and each sort of building on the other. Starting off, we're going to focus on generative AI ethics and the cognitive dimensions of disinformation. So this is all about the future of technology with disinfo and how it affects us also as a society. Going on from there, we're going to go a little bit more practical and see just how disinformation is produced, how it spreads, and current ways of debunking it. And here we can also look into why information gets really popular online, what are ways that information gets so spread, how the things like algorithms play into it, and also pleased to be joined by our current social media content creator as well, who can go into also a bit of the positive side about how we can spread good information online. Wrapping it up with our third panel, we have a journalist toolkit for fact-checking. Here we're very pleased to be joined again by Público, Portuguese newspaper, and from Deutsche Welle, who joined us previously in this project, to talk through about what professional journalists are currently doing with the wave of information they're getting in, and how do they process this to get it out to the bigger audiences. Then at the end, we're going to bring this all together, find that silver thread, and go through a couple of conclusions. And there is a survey, as there often is in these webinars, which is much appreciated if you fill it out, give some feedback. And also then the European Commission will be very happy to hear what you have to say. Throughout this whole period, we do have 1 or 2 breaks. I'm sure you're happy to hear. We have a coffee break after panel 1, and then also a lunch break after panel 2. So following from the agenda, just briefly on the objectives, or what we would also like to take away from this. It is very much like an individual study, let's say. We want to develop this kind of media literacy and critical thinking skills, so that when you go in and you're reading the newspaper and you're sharing things with others, you do this aspect of reading twice. You really think about how this information is affecting myself, affecting society around you, and maybe how we can look to prevent it. Moving on, there's a little bit of best practices as well for today. We do have a great audience actually from so many different places around Europe and across. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. We're all here to make sure everybody feels very invited to participate and contribute to the chat, and also they feel very comfortable with the discussions. We're also all about engagement and learning together. So any kind of thoughts you might want to do, please feel free to chuck these in as little emojis or chat in. And at the end, we're also, as I said, quite a diverse audience. So we will also take good care about avoiding any jargon or language that is not used in any day. And of course, you can also bring us up on this in the chat in case anything isn't so clear. We have a Q&A function actually at the second part of every panel. So of all of the three, we want to engage everybody within the audience here with all of the panelists. So you can put your questions in the Q&A function, which is currently on Zoom. I think you'll be able to see it as it's coming up. Here, also, all the audience can then rate the questions, move it up and down, and the panelists will do their best to approach all of them. You'll note this session is being recorded. It is, of course, only the screens of all the panelists and any sounds going out, but just so you know, and then that you can also share this recording later on with anybody who wasn't unfortunately able to be here with us today. So I think that wraps up all of the housekeeping rules as such before we start up today. Is there anything else that the consortium partners wanted to add here? Let's say no? Okay, nice. A bit of a warm up then to get ourselves ready to approach these very big topics of disinformation and make sure that we're very receptacle to what we can be learning here. The first point I want to bring up in this warm up start exercise is that like learning about disinformation and understanding how it affects us isn't to be done solo. And disinformation is so much about how it affects different kind of communities and individuals. So we always need to approach it in the sense of how is this both affecting me, but also everybody around me. I want you to take this moment then. Sorry, hey, maybe I'm just going to mute there. Take this opportunity then to, invite you to put yourself also in other communities' shoes, or perhaps think of examples that you've seen of disinformation that maybe wouldn't have maybe you think wouldn't have affected yourself, but could have seen how this affects other people. To help us put into the other shoes, I want to hear from everybody, what do you think when you talk about disinformation? And to do this, we have a nice, more technological approach that I'm going to show here. So we have a QR code up on the screen. Actually, at the moment, feel free to grab your phones with it. You can also use the link that's just up in the chat there at the top. I can send this to everybody in the chat. And this is like a word map. We want to hear, what do you think of when you're talking about disinformation? I've just put in a first example here for myself, where I think disinformation is an attack. It is like a form of weapon that you can fling at something. And this kind of goes from the definition that disinformation here, it is something that is intentionally false and intentionally harmful. You're using it to look to cause impact and damage. Great, I see here, propaganda is a massive one, of course. It has a very big history also coming out of the Second World War with ideas of like brainwashing, and mainly from governments also about how they can look to control societies. You see here also some actors coming in as well. We've noted Russia here, which is a very big example, particularly in the case of Ukraine. It's very prominent at the moment. And it's again a case of a government actor. They're looking to cause influence in other places. We have danger. Trolling. Trolling is also very interesting, actually. This is when we get into that point where we're not sure whether or not there is an intention to cause real damage, or whether or not it is more of a, yes, let's say an unintentional bit of sharing misinformation. So here we can go into some of the differences a little bit later. There's so much on social media and deepfakes. It's exciting to see that coming up, because it will be a topic also in some of the panels. So what are the platforms that we see so much about when we talk about disinformation? Confusion, my research, I'm very pleased to hear who has that in a little bit later, and great to hear we've got some experts in the field, of course, as well. Confusion, radicalization, deception. See here, I think we're then, and I see manipulation is now very big, so a couple of people have put that in. So you start to see all of these different attributes that we think about when we talk about disinformation. So here we've seen this like this emotional aspect of it being a danger and that it can be confusing. So how it goes on like an individual level. We've got aspects of polarization. So how it can end up splitting society and the way that we make decisions. So working more around in groups. We're touching here on some of the digital aspects like deepfakes and what kind of content can actually be used in disinformation. What can be used to trick us and spread falsities. And then also a lot of the different platforms and such where this has been used. I think war and Russia is also a topic that will come up in quite a bit. Like what is it when we look at disinformation on such a large scale? Yeah, we'll just do another minute or so if you want to put in any last words on what you're thinking about when you talk about disinformation. Perfect. Somebody might have to help me with the Cyrillic.
We have destabilization once.
Destabilization. Perfect. Thank you, Sanya. Yeah. Perhaps particular examples are also coming to your heads. From my side in the UK, we had this case around Brexit. And it was just a little bit before the time where this aspect of like fake news was so large, like pushed up by Trump, and where a lot of disinformation conversations came about. But like on reflection more now, the case of Brexit, particularly in a misinformation sense, so information that's not necessarily used to cause harm, but that is like false or unjustified, is spread and can have big influences within a population. We also saw this a lot, within the own US elections and probably in the current trials of Trump happening right now, actually, where he's using the criminal cases against him as a platform to rally. So how maybe this plays in with the idea of aspects of influence. Furthermore, also abuse of trust. That's a really nice example. And perhaps our journalist friends will be able to talk about this a little bit later when you're put in a position where you can communicate with so many people. How can you use that power for good and for bad? Geopolitical agendas, of course. Yeah, save money for the NHS was the big buzz in the UK. It came up. Okay. Then I think thank you very much for joining us in this exercise about what we talk about when we talk about disinformation. I just want to conclude with repeating again this example, this description of what we talk about when we say disinformation. We're talking about information which is false and that has an intention to cause harm. So these two aspects must be present there for it to be understood as disinformation. There are other terminology in this space like misinformation, which is false but not with the intention to cause harm. And there are other broader, let's say more currently used topics like fake news, which is a little bit of an abstract or a bit more of an ambiguous term that can roll in a lot of these other aspects. When we get into topics like propaganda, for instance, this can be mis and disinformation or fake news used for a political agenda to push in a certain way. See here, and then perhaps we'll see some other terminology popping up a little bit later, also from some of our panelists that they can look to explain as well. Right, we'll move back to the former slide. Okay, so it isn't a solo exercise. To build on this, I want to hear a little bit more from yourselves. So we've now talked about what we think of with that disinformation, but why is it that we're here today? Well, what is it that brings us here today? And I'd like to invite everybody to write this just in a sentence or two in the chat about what your motivation is for joining today. Has it been a particular example of disinformation that you've seen, or perhaps your research has brought you in that direction? Maybe, like Mila, you said that you're worried more about society and the direction that it's going in. I have one or two prompts here that you're also welcome to use. Personal interest, thanks, Julia. Also sounds great, Tanya. Also a way of understanding how the current field works. And current tools, no doubt, a bit later in the session, particularly under the journalistic panel, we'll see some of the most innovative tools that are currently in there. Kari, I think this might be one of the main reason, and no doubt one of the biggest problems of like why we're doing this project is this risk for democracy and our ability to make decisions together. Wanting some more about tools to identify disinformation. Risks. Indeed, thanks, Andrey. I was seeing figures recently. There are over 1 billion people going to the voting polls this year, which is an incredible figure even to think about. And then you can think of how the world may be at the end of it when all of those elections are done. Help your family and help yourself and others. Indeed, a very good reason. Elena. And Hanan, yeah, connecting to other projects and work in the field. Can often see that, particularly in a very fast-moving field like disinformation and media literacy, there can be multiple projects happening within the space that don't necessarily bump into each other. So indeed, it's a very important point. Dondi can't learn enough about this important topic. I love the energy on that one. Hygiene and a society's immune system against disinformation. Indeed, that's a very nice way to put it. As we see, like this aspect of media literacy, which was the core bit of Read Twice, or like our own individual responsibility towards it, is currently seen as one of the best ways in which we can counter disinformation. So it's not necessarily like proactively going after every spot of disinformation that we see, such as more things like fact checking, for instance, or bunking, but it's more developing our own resilience so that even when disinformation is there and it's present, that it doesn't have as much of a hold or an effect on society. Learn about fake think tanks in Brussels. I would also be interested to hear if you have any examples popping up from that. And integrating into personal and civil life. I think that is a good a conclusion there. Civil life, okay. The work, in case anybody else wants to share their final thoughts in this section here, please feel welcome to just drop it in the chat now. And if you see anybody that you think, hey, that motivation is my motivation, I want to connect, you can also just drop them a message. Hungarian ones in Brussels. It's a good question and will become even more of a question, I would see, with the council discussions at the moment with Hungary. Perfect. Okay, let's jump on from that. We're going to start getting into the directions of our first panels. This is when the expertise really jumps in. So I'm very excited to hear from all of our speakers and guests and such. The way it will work, each panel has a moderator that will be able to guide the discussion and bring through the 2 to 3 speakers that will take place in each panel. So everybody will be able to present for around 10 minutes, and then the moderator will also bring this together. In every panel, we're also excited to have this opportunity for the Q&A. So really motivate you to think of whatever questions that you might have during the panel is going on and drop them in that Q&A function here. And then the moderator will very kindly start to pick them up. So I would like to start inviting the moderator actually from the first panel. Start coming in.
Hello.
Perfect.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Perfect. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here.
So my name is Bozhidar Angueloff. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you for the opportunity, Yesenia, George. A little words for myself. I'm a PhD candidate in Sofia University at the Department of European Studies. Well, I've worked for FactCheck BG, which is the first Bulgarian independent platform for fact-checking. I'm very proud of this. And if somebody in the audience is not familiar with the platform, I encourage them to see it. And I will have this opportunity to congratulate my colleagues for their amazing job. Hello everyone again. welcome to this webinar. I'm glad to see some familiar faces in the audience. We have several exciting hours ahead of us, during which we will discuss issues related to disinformation, as you know, which is highly relevant challenge in today's digital age. While our wonderful speakers will present on extremely interesting and crucial topics, and I'm confident that everyone in the audience, even the experts on disinformation, will gain some valuable insights, which is exactly what we aim for. There will be a discussion, as George said already, at the end of the panel. So I invite all of the audience, all people, to ask their questions in the webinar question and answer chat. Our panelists will try to answer as many questions as possible, but please indicate which of the speakers you are asking your questions to. So in this first panel, we will talk about generative AI, ethics and cognitive dimensions of disinformation. The speakers, Andrey, Stoycheff, Dr. Federica Russo, and Dr. Kari, KIVINEN. We are going to start with Andy. Andy is founder and director of NTCenter, which is a national training center here in Bulgaria, and a member of EDMU's working group on standards and best practices in media literacy. His work is focused around applied research and development of innovation based on cognitive science, psychology, neuroscience, and neurolinguistics. His most recent work is focused on a comprehensive disinformation framework for education training on cognitive layers of disinformation and cognitive biases. Hi, Andy. We are happy to have you here today. The mic is yours when you're ready.
Hello, guys. Thank you, Bozhidar, for the introduction. It sounded a bit scary listening that introduction to myself. I hope I'll be up to the task. Thanks for the invite. I was really excited, first of all, to always lend a helping hand to colleagues who work in the same field. But it's not just one direction help. We always learn from each other. So I'm very hopeful that there'll be a nice exchange of ideas here. And yeah, let me just share my screen and start with that. I'm sure that many colleagues would agree that for a researcher, it's often pretty torturous to try and find sorry, this didn't seem to work in the right way. Can you see presentation now?
Yes,
slide?
we can see.
Yes. Okay, great. So it's always very difficult to decide how to trim your work to 10 minutes or 12 slides or something like that. So I said, okay, it's literally impossible to go into detail of everything. I love my work, so I'd love to be sharing a lot of it. But I try to focus on the latest, and the cognitive layers of disinformation is something that I've been working on for the last 1.5 years, trying to develop a new model around it. And before that, and to put things into some context, so where does this interest come from? Okay, maybe that's this slide. This is the recent and ongoing R&D that we're doing. So it's most cognitive biases in education context and how to do debiasing via video platforms, testing alternative debias models that would improve decision-making for students and young professionals, especially in impactful jobs such as journalism or medicine or political science. We also work on bias assessment for teachers on the really interesting issue in addressing controversial topics in classroom. So how do we speak in class with our students about the war in Ukraine, the contentious issues that split Europe in half, such as Brexit, for example, a few years ago, or the immigration-related issues, stuff like that. Then we work on an improvement, hopefully, fact-checking practices and processes by tapping into what actually young people do without having any training on fact-checking or trying to learn from them. We also engage in cognitive deconstruction of conspiracy theories, lovely piece of work there. What else? Biases and stereotypes about different scenarios and simulations, cognitive markers in public discourse on social media, and labeling of cognitive drivers by building signaling models. That's more or less the jungle that we work with. I understand it sounds confusing. If it didn't, it wouldn't be true. And we're often jumping between fields. And as Bozhidar said, it's often psychology, but sometimes it's cognitive linguistics. Sometimes it's neuroscience. That's where the excitement comes from. You can always learn so much. So that's the context. A reminder then of what cognition is, because we're going to talk about cognitive layers. So the cognition is that sophisticated and intricate process which we use to acquire, process, and comprehend or make sense of knowledge using all of the mental faculties that are at our disposition. That means intellectual functions, thought, perception, intuition, that come both from previous experience, but also from current sensory input at the moment we are faced with new piece of information. And what do we mean by cognitive drivers? Cognitive drivers are factors or mechanisms that influence and drive cognitive processes, such as perception, attention, memory, decision-making, and problem-solving. So cognitive drivers are the things that help us, steer us in a particular direction, and in the context of what we're doing today, ultimately have the potential of driving us into where this information wants us to go. So this is how we are impacted by this information. And that's why I want to talk about cognitive layers and cognitive drivers today. And a little bit of an insight. I'm sure that many of you will have heard about the theory of a brain as a predictive machine. It's an explanatory approach to what the brain does, and some fun facts around it that will help us further down this presentation. So what the brain does, it tries to look for matches and similarities with previous experiences. So trying to make sense of the world is by looking, have we been in that situation before? If we think of primitive man, so have I met a lion before, and what did I do then? And was that successful? Should I do the same thing this time? The brain attempts to make sense of things by looking for patterns and similarities, even when they do not exist. So the brain doesn't like things that cannot be explained by its current state of affairs, and tries to find connections, patterns, and similarities, even if they're pretty abstract, even they cannot be corroborated. But that brings our brain to a sense of relative calm, because, yay, finally we have an explanation of something. We need not to worry about it. Also, the brain looks for explanations, and when it finds this, it clings to them. That's the comfort part. So we are very likely to stick to things that makes us feel comfortable. So explanations that we like for some reason, say they are aligned with our values or things like that, we tend to stick to them. This makes us more difficult to change opinions or change behavior patterns. To the extent that when the brain is faced with a situation where there's a dissonance, and the dissonance is a conflict between, say, what's in front of me and what I remember from before, or I hear one thing and I see another thing. So sensory dissonance is also a thing. And the brain does that by using an evolutionary mechanism of avoidance and dismissal. So when things don't make sense as part of a cluster, then we tend to drop those parts of the cluster that don't align with the rest. And now to the real fun stuff about the cognitive layers. So I would invite you to think of us, a collective us, as someone who goes into a series of rooms. And in each room, we see something different, and we need to make sense of this different thing. And this different thing influences the way we perceive information. And we do that room by room. But keep in mind that through this journey of several rooms, that this is not exactly how the process plays out in the mind. It all happens at once. And the reason that the brain is such a complex structure, complex system, is that it needs to be able to deal with so many things at the same time. In order for us now to be able to address them, we'll try to break them down, and we go into different rooms. And the first room will be the room for room for words. Thinking about how disinformation and misinformation may impact us, and thinking about words. We know that sensational words that create a sense of urgency or exclusivity, they tend to enhance the legitimacy of what the brain perceives as a legitimate. And how that works in terms of brain processes, words and text stimulate the amygdala by heightening the emotional arousal and alertness. So some words are known to put us in a state of alertness. When we're put in that state of alertness, that has an impact on how we absorb that information. And you see a list of words, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of those in pieces of disinformation. You've also seen them in a lot of political campaigns, probably. So secret, exposed, shocking, last moment to see that a lot of clickbait works in that way. So words and text are one of the main cognitive drivers that disinformation uses to penetrate our defenses. Our next room is about colors. When we talk about media, when we talk about pictures, videos, colors are another powerful driver that dictates how we think about disinformation. Depending on the colors, information may seem more urgent, may look authoritative, and by this, with increased likelihood of acceptance. Colors being processed in the visual cortex can evoke specific associations or emotions. You will see that a lot of the things we see in these few rooms actually appeal to our emotions and feelings. And if we have that sort of reinforcement, we are more likely to fall for disinformation. Just a few examples. Red speaks to danger and urgency. Black speaks to secrecy and authority. Orange is alarm and energy. Bright yellow is caution and attention. Now you probably have an idea why most of the breaking news banners on TV stations are usually in the red or yellow. It's because that's what the brain considers to be important. That's what focuses the attention. Next, we go to images, and by images we also include videos. It's very easy to manipulate people by using manipulated or miscontextualized images. You spread information effectively because you offer visual proof. For the brain, images and the visual cortex is something that is very, very important. It has high priority. So when you see something and it hits you via an emotion, you're more likely to experience something that is bypassing critical analysis. we tend to believe our eyes, even knowing that that we can be deceived. I mean, there's this common saying, well, it's true. Of course, it's true. I saw it. I was there. It happened. So the brain tends to process images very rapidly, and as I just said, accepts visual data at face value. Those visual centers in the brain that we spoke about, they have direct neural connection to the emotional and memory centers. So they're very quick to evoke emotions. And images that are often used in disinformation, those are outdoor photos, dramatic visuals, images that are out of context, or collage of different images. We also see deepfakes. We can also be very deeply influenced by satellite images, graphs and charts, symbolic imagery, text overlay on imagery, and other similar. You get the pattern now. In each room, we see we are confronted with a different part, with a different set of drivers that dictate how we perceive a certain piece of information. Going to sound, that's our next room. We know that auditory triggers can heighten the perceived legitimacy or urgency of misinformation. Certain sounds can induce stress, curiosity, other emotion. Certain sounds can trigger action. They are likely to force you to do things. And alarm tones, whispering, dramatic music, explosion and bangs. If you want to convey a gloomy feeling about the danger, sound is a critical part of that performance that you want to put together. Chanting, as in chanting demonstrations, crowd noises, ominous music. Just think about a movie that you like a lot, or a set of movies that you like a lot. Think about the role of the soundtrack for that movie. Think about how the movie makers build pressure. Think about the sounds they use to build that pressure. Think about the role of silence also, because, well, it might be a disputable thing, but in a way, silence is also a sound. The lack of sound has that effect. And that could facilitate the absorption of this information. Symbols are another powerful thing, also because it's very much related to emotions and feelings. Depending on what the symbols are and how manipulated they are, they can provide a false sense of legitimacy or authority. They can tap into deep-seated beliefs or cognitive biases. You can think about profiles that use fake photos for the images. You can think about powerful symbols like flags, like swastika, like like religious symbols. All of those evoke strong emotions, and based on that are likely to influence how you think or act. Next, we go to one of the last two slides, and this is emotions. Emotions that are evoked by misinformation are more like, information that is manipulated, that is deceitful, is more likely to be shared and believed because it feels more personal or pressing. It taps into the limbic system, that is an older system, older version of our brains, and it can bypass rational thought processes because it directly stimulates the emotional centers. It makes it hard to think critically. Think about it. How likely are you to be reasonable, to have a clear mind when you're in fear, when you're angry, when you are saddened by something, when you're disgusted by something, or when you feel resentment or curiosity or hope or despair. I think there was even that movie about different characters that play different emotions in the brain of a person. So all of the previous rooms of the text, the images, the sounds, all of them have the potential to trigger emotions. And the load that these emotions have based on previous experiences is what dictates how likely are we to perceive the disinformation and say, okay, this is truthful, I like it, or this doesn't seem legit, I'm gonna drop it. The last of the drivers that I'm gonna speak about are feelings. Misinformation and disinformation that provokes certain feelings can be, again, accepted without thorough scrutiny. It just feels right, it resonates, it falls in line with what you already believe and feel comfortable with. So how can it not be true when it corresponds to what you already expect to see? Whatever emotion or feeling is loaded onto a piece of disinformation, that is the booster, that is what drives it and makes it efficient. Feelings and emotions also have very strong potential to influence decision-making. And if you have children, probably most of you have, then you would know that you would often invite your kids, okay, stop now, you're angry, you're emotional, let's think, be calm. If you're in a dispute, you don't want to make a decision while you're very angry or agitated. We tend to prefer a calmer version of our mind, a sort of peace of mind when we make important decisions. And some of these feelings can be intuition, gut reaction, discomfort, unease, satisfaction, frustration. Again, I want to make it clear that these cognitive layers, they're not just related to disinformation, they're related to information. So these are drivers that makes us think or act in a certain way. Whether there's a malicious actor behind the piece of information that we're talking about, then obviously that's dangerous. But if we, as I'm looking forward to hear from the colleague, the social media influencer or expert, because those same techniques can be used for positive things. If you want to make a positive change, you want to evoke emotions, you want to make people feel good about it. The mechanism is the same. It's just the direction, the mathematical symbol, if you wish. One is a plus, the other one is a minus. So I'm not saying that these drivers are a bad thing. They're just there, and we need to be aware that they're there. We need to be aware of how they work and whether or not they can affect us in a certain situation. So now I'm going to invite you once again to think about those few rooms that we visited. But in fact, we see this as a combined attack on our senses. We read something, we hear sounds, we experience the emotion at the same time. It happens all at the same time. But your brain, it's a very lonely creature. It lives completely in the dark, hence the black slide. So this is where your brain lives. And the way it communicates with the outside world is, if you wish, by receiving emails and phone calls by the different senses. So somebody rushes into that black room or picks up the phone and tells the brain, I just saw somebody, I saw a politician do something, or I heard something. And while the brain is getting that information, there's another phone call coming in and saying, I don't feel good at the moment. I feel angry for some reason. And the brain, sitting there alone in the dark, must make some sense of what's going on, because it needs to make a decision of what you're going to do next. The fact that we're vulnerable, it has an evolutionary explanation. We are wired to be relatively efficient in the long run. So all the cognitive biases, all the different inefficiencies of the way we think, of the cognitive processes in the brain, they work okay in the long run. But for any single episode, they can be very bad decisions. Most of the time we are rushed for time. We don't have enough time, or we don't have enough information, or we have too much information. And we need to make a decision very quickly because there's the next decision coming down the pipeline. That's what forces us sometimes to act irrationally. And we have to rely on those cognitive triggers to do the best they can. And with that in mind, I would like to leave you with something. Did you believe what I said throughout this presentation? And did you trust it? And that would be it from me. If for some reason you trusted it, because I mean, there's always people who trust me, very few of them, but there's always some. I would like to invite an internal reflection process. Why? What of the things I said and showed and spoke about, what of the manners that I expressed them with, what made you think that this is trustworthy? How do you know that the slides that I show you were not manipulated? How do you know the content is true? The content is actually true. So thank you very much for your attention. I know it's not extensive. It's just a little part. It's like opening the door and seeing what's inside. And I hope I was at least able to trigger your interest and maybe make you smile a couple of times. It is one of the areas of our research where you really need some time to let it settle down for a little bit and then try to make sense of it. But then making sense of it, please be mindful that what you consider as rational is already subject to all those cognitive drivers, and probably more. So can we ever be really rational?
Well, Andy, thank you so much for your presentation on cognitive layers of disinformation. It was very interesting and made me think about so many things. Actually, I already have some questions for you, which I will ask at the end of the discussion. Meanwhile, as I said before, I invite all of the audience to ask questions in the platform chat. Now it's time for our next panelist, who is Dr. Federica Russo. Federica is full professor in philosophy and ethics of Techno-Science at Utrecht University, where she holds the Westerdijk Chair of Vrije Dental Institute. She is also honorary professor of the Department of Science and Technology Studies at University College London. Federica is currently editor-in-chief of Digital Society and member of the steering committee of European Philosophy and Science Association. It's an honor to have you here among us today, Federica. The topic of her presentation is Demystifying Deepfakes, Lessons from the Solar Project. The spotlight is on you, so you can start when you're ready.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor to be in such an interesting panel. And I also hope to keep up kind of to the standards from the previous presentation. Let me see if I can make the technology work and share my presentation with you. Hopefully you can see it in full screen. Yes? Okay, so again, many thanks for the kind invitation. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to present a work in progress from the SOLARIS project. And in many ways, what I'm going to tell you concerning deepfakes and generative AI, generated content complements very nicely what Andy has just explained. Andy really went through the processes that goes on into our brains, and I will try to take another perspective and see from the outside what happens to us as groups of individuals when we are exposed to such contents. But also what I will try to do in this presentation is to show how the questions related to deepfakes really begins with asking what is true and what is not, and quickly we move to ethical questions, ethico-political questions that relate to what is right and what is wrong, and what is beneficial and what is harmful. So, now, as I just said, deepfakes are strongly related to the question of truth, because what we have observed is that we really have a hard time to discriminate between what to believe and what not to believe, which is also kind of the end of Andy's story, no? Why should we believe Andy? And the same question applies to all these audiovisual contents that circulates on social media. So it is a very important question to ask, what make us believe one another story. This is actually a very old topic in epistemology, because we have always been trying to understand what makes us reliable, or what makes a story in itself reliable. And so photographs and videos have long been held as our epistemic backstop. So an epistemic backstop is a concept introduced in social epistemology applied to media. And you have to think about it as where you kind of stop and say, okay, now I believe it, okay? And so if you ask the question, oh, what is true and what is not when I look outside at the world? Well, you know, reality moves. But if you can capture it in a photograph, then hopefully this piece of truth remains forever. But the picture is also static, and so videos really added an important element of why we should believe in these stories, because they tell you a whole portion of the truth that somebody has watched. But how can I believe that you really watched this? Well, you show me the video, okay? And so here you see that there is a very important question about the relation between reality and how we tell things about reality. And these different types of epistemic backstop regulate our communications and have been given us reasons to be truthful and also to accept other statements as truth. So if a very respectable newspaper publishes photos, I tend to trust this. You know, the photo gives me really an idea of what is true about the story that is being told. That evolved, but also this is something that has been totally scrambled with the advent of generative AI and of deepfakes, because this idea of the epistemic backstop is now failing, right? I mean, because we know that we can create, as a matter of seconds, videos that are totally fake, the pictures that are totally fake. And so why should we trust this content? And now notice that it is not that this is a new thing, because we have been altering audiovisual content for a very long time. I mean, everyone knows about Photoshop, but there are important differences with Photoshop. This is what in the project we learn from our colleagues doing visual semiotics. The intentions are different. With Photoshop, you may want to do a top model actually prettier, but it is still the top model. So, and also there are other types of elements that come in the technicalities of how we alter audiovisual contents. But hopefully it is clear that that the deepfakes are really changing how we regulate our trust. Is just in front of our eyes. Now, the big effect of these deepfakes really is related to trust and distrust. Because clearly, if every audiovisual content can be faked, then at the end of the day, we will be able to trust nothing. There is no reason to act truthfully. So this, on the societal at the societal level, really is worrisome, clearly. But I'm not here to send you a despairing message that this is the end of the world as we know it, etc. I need to understand how we move from these questions about truth to questions that are inherently ethical in character. And this is exactly kind of the link. You know, if we can't establish the truth, then we have distrust coming in. And when we have distrust, this has consequences that are ethical and also political in character. And what we are noticing, and this is still in the early stages of SOLARIS investigations, that technical solutions alone will not fix these problems, because clearly you can say, okay, so all we need is a deepfake checker, and then we get rid of these things. But this is a technical fix that is not going to do the trick. And the approach we are taking is really looking beyond the deepfake as an artifact and consider instead the whole network of social actors that are in place around a deepfake. And this is what I'm going to show you next. Okay, so much attention has been given to the deepfake itself, basically what you see at the very center of this network. Hopefully you see my mouse moving. But now this is probably at the center, but there is a whole battery of people and artifacts that are around it. What in the terminology of science and technology studies is called a socio-technical system. To begin with, somebody is creating the software to produce this AI-generated content. Somebody is also distributing not only the software, but also kind of the material for creating the deepfakes, and then in turn to distribute this AI-generated content. At the same time, once we create a deepfake, somebody is the target, and this target also comes with their own network, family, work, the political environment, if the target is a political person. Then there is the online circulation. These things travel on different types of platforms, and where they travel may make a difference to how much they are trusted or distrusted. Also because different users use different platforms. So depending on where they are kind of injected, they may have one effect or another. And just as this can affect my individual perception, it can also affect public discourse. In all this, we have a whole range of regulations, directives, and kind of law instruments that we try to put in place to put some order in this chaos. So, as you can see, you can't just focus on the artifact and analyze what makes it fake and why do I believe or not to believe it. Clearly, the work that Andy has just presented is essential also, or especially, to see what happens here at the user reception and why we as individuals, we tend to believe some things more than another. But the fix is not just here. The fix can be in many different aspects. And the reason why I say this is also the following. Not all deepfakes are kind of bad things to have around. And so another thing that we are doing in the project is to start categorizing deepfakes. And so we have the title of the social media, we describe them, what this is about, where you can access it, when it was released, what kind of deepfake is that, for entertainment or maybe for social purposes, in journalism, for political reasons. Maybe there are other characteristics that are important. In some cases, it was not authorized, the creation of this AI-generated content. In some cases, it was authorized. In some other cases, the target deceased, which changes entirely what you can or cannot do with the images of these people. There is also a question of disclosure. Is there a disclosure or not in the video? This may give you a lot of hints about whether or not to believe this content. Likewise, the function, is it for novelty? Is it for role reprisal? Is it for journalism, for campaigning, for interactivity? Why is this thing created and circulated? And so you can go on. And so we are created a number of categories to understand what types of deepfakes are around. And this is all to say, we shouldn't just demonize the technology in itself. We have to understand what we want to retain and what we do not want to retain from it. I'm trying to change slide now. Okay, so let me go back to the network now, because as I said, there are ethical and political questions that arise on top of these epistemic ones, and there may be a number of entry points to address the problem. So let's see where exactly these ethico-political questions arise. So for instance, how and why is generative technology created? Now, the way in which I formulated the how and why is not just in terms of the technical capabilities of the technologies, is really in terms of values, is really in terms of what we want to achieve at the societal level. That's why the question I asked there has an important ethico-political component. Likewise, how and why are AI products advertised and distributed? I mean, some people or some organizations really hold a responsibility for allowing or not allowing the circulation of softwares and contents. Or why are deepfakes produced in the first place? You know, this is at the core, and it has been mainly at the target, especially if you look at how this whole thing started from pornography. Clearly, there was already an important ethical dimension, but this really spreads out if you look at how deepfakes have been used to kind of manipulate public opinion in the case of war or in other very sensitive contexts. How are these practiced, regulated? Again, this is really not just a technical question about how we come up with law. This is really a question about what kind of values, ethical principles guide, especially the EU, that is really at the forefront of these regulations. Why share dubious content with others? You know, again, this is not to say that we are all dumb and we share anything, but I mean, it's really to say that we have to reclaim our responsibility for what happens on the internet. And then it comes kind of to the personal dimension. Why do I believe or disbelieve dubious content? And this related to who I am and who is in my network and what I do actually in my network. And likewise, how does discussion and debates influence reception? Then kind of a part of what Andy told us about the cognitive biases, etc., is part of this, but even much more, because it really shows where we can push the public opinion. Now, why is this not just a message of despair and worrying? Because to me, there is a lot to be said about empowerment, and especially about having a thorough discourse on digital citizenship and education. What we have to work on, it seems to me, is at the level of self-awareness. Where do I fit in the network and who I am connected to? So this is something that even all the digital regulations that the EU is proposing, of course, that they cannot cover. This has to start from myself and also from the very young generations. There is a question about caution. So aside from quality, is there a reason to believe social media content? So again, it invites for looking not just at the artifact, but what is the artifact part of as a broader network. And finally, a question about proactiveness. How can I act to make my close environment safer? Every one of us has a responsibility, and this is not to dust off kind of the responsibility of the big tech companies or whatever, but this is just to say the reason why the message is not of despair is because we all have a chance to change things, at least in our little environment. And with this, I close. I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Federica, for these exciting presentations. We already have a question for you as well. Now it's time for our third panelist, for our third speaker. This is Dr. Kari, who will share some insights and lessons from Finland on digital information literacy. A little about Dr. KIVINEN. Since 2017, he has been leader of development of the Finnish fact-checking and digital information literacy project, FaktaBaari Edu, also known as FaktaBaari. He also is a member of the EU expert group on tackling disinformation and promoting digital literacy through education and training. Currently, he combines his work at EU Intellectual Property Office with writing and lecturing on media and digital information literacy, artificial intelligence, fact-checking, and intellectual property education. Hello, Kari. The floor is yours when you're ready.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for the presentation. It has been so interesting to listen to two very different presentations this morning, and I'm kind of coming from the third different corner. Let's say Finnish FaktaBaari has been, besides of being part of the EDMO, besides of being a fact-checking organization, it has concentrated quite a lot on digital education and digital information literacy, and very recently also to the AI. So I will go through quite a lot of all kind of information in a very kind of quick way. I didn't know really what kind of audience there are, so I've been preparing all kind of things. So if you are hearing something which is not really interesting for you, wait for the next slide. So I'm working in the EU, and I'm starting from the lifelong learning competencies. The Ministries of Education have agreed on certain competencies, and digital competence happens to be one of them. And very recently, there has been a new DISComp, which is defining what are digital competencies, and it's have a new competence for artificial intelligence awareness. And I will concentrate in the last part of my presentation, especially on this awareness of the use of AI to understand better the challenges related to privacy, ethics, and rights of children, and so on. So this is a recent statistics from the Eurostat. What is our level of digital skills in different European countries? And Finland is always in the top, and we don't really know why. I'm trying to keep some excuses, but it happens to be like that. And what are these digital competencies? So I have had a pleasure to participate in the Joint Research Center DITSCOMP definition development. And if you want to know what it means to be digitally competent, you can go through the DITSCOMP 2.2. It's quite interesting package of information on what kind of competencies European citizens should have. There is a very kind of ambitious target that by 2030, 80% of the population should have these skills. And to give an example of the taste of the expected level of knowledge, skills, and attitudes of citizens, citizens should be aware that online environments contain all type of information, including misinformation and disinformation. They should be able to analyze and critically evaluate their search results. And there should be also this positive attitude to fact check of the information, which is missing sometimes quite drastically. In the beginning, George already explained what is the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Simply, misinformation is a mistake, disinformation is a lie, and malinformation is kind of maybe correct information, but it's spread to harm somebody. In the Europe, there is a lot of studies about what is the situation, and I've been also participating in this expert group tackling disinformation and promoting digital literacy. And we kind of went through all the documents, and we found out that about 80% of the European citizens think that disinformation is a problem, and 81% declared that it's a danger for the democracy. For the young people who we think often to be digitally native, it has shown that they are not so digitally native at all when we are asking to analyze the content. So this is a very new statistic from the Eurostat from December, where the individuals who have been seeing untrue or doubtful information in the last 3 months, it shows that there is a big difference between countries, which shows also that most probably there is a big difference about awareness of the disinformation in the social media and internet. But let's say we have still much work to do. I was asked to say something about Finland, and I've been doing it a lot, and I could speak 3 hours, 4 hours about it. We have a very special education system, and we actually start the media and information literacy already at the preschool in the early education. And we have recently published so-called new reading skills for digital competencies. And this is only to give you the taste that already in the pre-primary, we start familiarizing children to how to find information through the different kind of devices. Because we think that when children come to school, they are already heavy users of media. They have seen thousands of advertisements. They have seen a lot of films. They have been playing with all kind of games. They have been playing with their parents' iPads, and how to educate them to be more critical users of media is the key. And little by little, step by step, we go further. And for example, in this secondary, students are 14, 15. The pupil is able to assess the reliability of the information and justify his or her evaluation. So these are the goals we are trying to go. Now, a few words about the information literacy and digital information literacy, because there are so many concepts on MIL going around. So in the old good times, librarians were the champions of the information literacy. I mean, information literacy have been developed by different library organizations, how to classify information, how to classify books, how to find the information quickly. And if you go to any library in the world, they have nice systems where you can kind of be guided, or you can know the system, you can find the information quickly. In the modern days, for the last 10, 15 years, each of us has a mobile phone and we have search engines. And we are ourselves responsible of finding the information which is matching our information needs. And when we do any search in Google or any other software, anything, we get thousands, if not millions of hits. And it's our task, our responsibility to find the information which we are looking for. And on top of that, the search engines are not absolutely transparent. You can, I mean, there are sponsored messages, there are all kind of optimated systems to put, for example, the misinformation on the top of the search. So that's why in the FaktaBaari we have decided that we are promoting digital information literacy, which is how to help citizens, and especially young ones, to find, access, manage, understand, integrate, etc., the information safely through digital technologies. And this is a very important part of active and civic citizenship. We are not, how to say, saying that what is wrong and what is not wrong, but we would like people to do their decisions and their choices, for example, in politics, based on the facts and not on disinformation. That's why we have published our digital information literacy guide, which can be downloaded, and it's also in English, if you are interested to go deeper on that. We are promoting online reading skills because we think that in the, let's say, in the printed media, what we have all learned to read and analyze, the mechanisms are different than in the online environments. And we have been going through with researchers effective methods to tackle disinformation, for example, pre-bunking, debunking, strategy, ignorance, lateral reading, etc., etc. And for example, lateral reading is probably known for everybody of you, which means that instead of, if you get, let's say, 10 results in Google, not to open the site completely and analyze the first one, but look first the background by opening new search beside. And so we are avoiding to spend time and spend our attention on the sources which are not worth reading. So in the first, Andy asked the interesting question: do we believe on what he said? And when we are analyzing information and when we are teaching how to analyze the online information, there are different things. First of all, the content. Is the content correct? Is the quality of the arguments, the comparing with other texts, like I said in the lateral reading, comparing with the previous knowledge. But then it's also important to assess the reliability of the source and the expertise of the expert. And I do think that Andy was quite convincing, and I think that I believe him because he's an expert, he works in the university, he has been studying this for a long time. But in the online, and for example in Twitter or X, there are a lot of experts which are not really expert of the subject. But it's important to differentiate between the content and the person or the party who is putting over the information. And we have been kind of suppressing. In the beginning, in 2016, in FaktaBaari, we had a long list of things one should check on the online text. Now we are only promoting 3 questions. Who is spreading the claim? Can you find it? Is it a reporter? Is it a, what is it? Where is it coming? Is it a reliable source? Then what evidence has been shown? And the third, what do the other sources in the to say about it? And we have also created videos, also in English, to promote this if you are interested. I've also had a pleasure to collaborate with Stanford University group where we kind of look the scientific disinformation. And if you are interested in this, especially the question on how to be sure that the scientific claim is true, I warmly recommend to go through this report. It's quite interesting. Now there is this new literacy called AI literacy. It has emerged only in 2016, and little by little it's developing. It's not yet fully developed because the generative AI, which came up about 1 year and 1 month ago, has completely changed the scenery. But there are 4 elements we see important. First of all, understanding how generative AI is working. How is it made? I mean, how the large language models are made. Then, very important, as a fact checkers, we are focusing on this, recognizing the limitations of generative AI. And then there is this important thing of interaction between humans and AI, which is a big thing now in the hybrid education. And also the understanding where the AI has been coming from and where it's going. But already now we can say that this is a quite important skill for modern days, not only for the nerds dealing with the computers. That's why in FaktaBaari we had just last week published our digital information literacy guide. It's still in Finnish, but we are planning to translate it in English in the forthcoming months. We all know that artificial intelligence is all around us, and actually much more than normal people normally think. If you are driving a car, if you are using household devices, if you are opening a television, if you are taking a photo with a mobile phone, you are already using a lot of artificial intelligence techniques. But there are some, I used the last minutes on the worries of artificial intelligence. First of all, there are copyright issues. It's not transparent how the artificial intelligence is trained. I mean, I'm speaking about generative AI. There are a lot of problems on how to protect one's information. And there is a lot of law cases now going on when we don't have yet the case law. And also that the organizations or the services, AI services, are working in a different continent than European Union, which might have totally different copyright rules. Output issues, there are a lot of problems, and the latest is the New York Times against OpenAI case, where we don't really know where the generative AI services have been finding their materials. What we know that they are trained by materials used in internet, and we know that it contains a lot of disinformation. What we know that all the AI services available today, they are not complying to data protection, European data protection rules. And that's why it's absolutely evident that one cannot share any confidential material, for example, in the prompts. If you are a teacher, don't ever put students' name or students' information in the prompts of AI, because all the prompts are used as training materials for the next generation of materials. Already spoke about the non-transparency of the AI. And for the schools, this is really difficult, and for educators, because there is always a problem to know what to trust and what not to trust. And for the students, this is something I've been trying to explain to the students, that actually the artificial intelligence, even though you have a good chat, and it seems that it understands what I say or what I communicate, but it doesn't. It's like a parrot, which is kind of learning to imitate sounds and words, and it's using it without understanding the real meaning of the text. And for example, ChatGPT openly says that it can produce inaccurate information about people, places, and facts, sources, and a lot of other things. So we have to be careful with the information. It's for the people who are spreading this information. Artificial intelligence is providing tools to do it more professional. In the past, for example, in Finland, we were able to find the kind of disinformation coming from outside because the Finnish language is difficult to write. But nowadays, the fake messages are perfect. The images are nearly like real ones. And what is important to know that in spite of containing disinformation in the training materials, there is more and more evidence that AI services are hallucinating. They are inventing things. They want to please the person, or not please, but they want to answer to the person. And if they don't find any material, they are developing it out themselves. So control is needed. We heard already about the high quality deepfakes, how they are used in a positive and negative. And we are worried about the negative. There have been proofs that they have been used, for example, just before the elections, for example, in Europe, and they have probably already influenced something. So we have also in FaktaBaari created a game in order to inform young gamers about the dangers of the deepfakes, and we have this stop, think, check slogan. We should, when we are seeing an emotional, colorful, lot of feelings containing a picture or a message, we should stop, think about it, and check if it's true. So the instructions we give for AI users in Finland nowadays is never share any information which is not available otherwise. Assess critically all the materials produced. Never copy any output of Gen AI directly, for example, in the emails or sharing without verification. And never rely AI models in a hurry, because that's creating a problem. So what we want to propose is that digital skills are something we can learn, we can teach them, and we can use them in our personal lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kari, for these presentations. Well, we have a lot of questions from the audience. I have some questions as well. We will start with the questions to Federica. The first one, we see hearing about AI. Do you think that we are approaching a scenario where social media will become impossible to regulate and moderate, as there is too much disinformation to counteract? Additionally, where should we encourage people to go instead for fact-based news and debates? And the second question, this is the question that I wanted to ask you. Nowadays, we see how the meme and deepfakes culture for entertainment rise. So should these deepfakes and memes, this content which is made especially for entertainment, be marked as faked in the social media, for example, by fact checkers? What do you think about it? Thank you very much in advance.
Thank you for your questions. These are really huge questions that I won't probably able to answer in a couple of sentences. But on regulating, I think there are two aspects that can be regulated. One is the use, but it is also the development and the distribution of social media. And I hope that there will be more work on the regulation of the development and distribution of social media, so that the burden is not once again put just on the user to limit their abilities to use these things, but they're really kind of something that is done upstream to see why and what technologies we want to develop and why. And remind me quickly of your second question, Bozhidar. No, you're muted.
Do you think that deepfakes and memes, which are made especially for entertainment purposes, should be marked as faked in social media, having in mind that they are made especially for entertainment purposes?
Yeah, look, I would be very wary if social media start being the owner of what is kind of ticked for safe or not. I think we have to have a discussion about what kind of organizations are trustful and are trustworthy and why. So we have already a news agency, and they should have more responsibility in this. So I think with this other conversation is also very, very delicate. And although I see that there are good intentions in, say, Facebook ticking, oh, sensitive content, COVID, etc., I am worried that this may fire back, and it can also channel public opinion in the direction that they want, and we don't know exactly what it is. So I'm not sure that this is the solution.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know that you're in a hurry. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for the answers. I will move on to the questions to Andy. Andy, we have a lot of questions for you. I will begin with the thing that I wanted to ask you first, and I'll give you some context, some background. Well, when we are talking about fighting disinformation nowadays, we have done a lot since 2016 when the problem appeared. We have frameworks, we have legislations, we have, for example, the DSA, the Digital Service Act in the EU, which is unique in its nature. Moreover, fact checkers are working as hard as they can, and we are observing new projects arising all the time in the world. Meanwhile, people are promoting media literacy at school, and we have events like this more and more oftenly. But somehow I get this feeling that our efforts are not enough. And what am I actually thinking? You talked a lot about emotions, and I feel that there is like a lot of fear in users, and it's very strong nowadays. So somehow I think that we need to approach this fear with more empathic approach in order to understand it and address it the way it needs to be addressed. Can you offer us some insights on what exactly this approach should be? How exactly should we use these emotions you talked about? And I'm gonna ask you 2 more questions, if it's okay for you. You already saw them in the Q&A section, hearing about disinformation, how disinformation actors use the appeal of emotions, colors, language, symbols, and so on. Should we copy their tactics in order to counter disinformation? Are there any risks in this strategy? And the last question, could you go into more details about the cognitive biases and processing behind conspiracy theories, and perhaps any individual differences which can explain why some people appear more susceptible to conspiracy theories compared to others? If you don't remember the questions, I can repeat it to you. So yeah.
That's okay. Thank you. I made some notes actually. As Federica said, those are questions that might require several weeks to be answered. But I'll try to be as concise as possible. And I think some of them are close enough, at least from the answering perspective. So if you allow me, I'll try to answer them as a block. I'll leave the one with the fear and the feelings that you placed number 1, because I need a few more minutes to figure out what are the possible aspects in addressing that. But regarding the cognitive bias, this was from Eleanor, I believe, the first question. regarding cognitive biases and conspiracy theories. I just want to point to two interesting examples probably of biases. First of all, biases are mental shortcuts. They help us function. If they were not there, if we didn't evolve with the help of having biases, we would simply stop functioning, because the amount of decisions that we need to take at any given moment is such that we would just be blocked if we needed to take the main pathway, so to critically think about everything that is in front of us. So the brain has this way of figuring out that when we don't have enough time, depending on the importance it places on certain issues, it puts them on an automatic decision-making route. And that's how biases typically work. There are about 200 of them. The field is very fluid. A lot of research still going on. Two of the interesting cases, and that are very relevant to the topics we're discussing now. One is the Dunning-Kruger one. I'm sure most of you would have heard about it. The Dunning-Kruger is a situation where the less you know about the subject, the more competent you feel about it. So you read something, a very little piece of information, maybe you even verified it, you checked it, it checked scientifically and so on. And then you start having the feeling and expressing that to others, that you are an expert in the field. It might be, it might come with very good intentions, of course, but this is something we see very often. People who don't know a lot about a given subject, they know some of it. They tend to project that and think they're actually very, very competent. Another one that comes into play is called the blind spot bias, and this is where we believe that the biases don't apply to us. So we know all about them, we know how they function, we know how people can get manipulated because of biases, but they don't apply to us because we are just one step ahead of it. We're smarter, we are more knowledgeable, we know how to protect ourselves. So we see biases in others, we somehow fail to see them in ourselves. Both of these relate heavily to disinformation. Now, the question about conspiracy theories. We don't have a research that says people who believe in conspiracy theories are somehow stupid or illiterate or anything like that. Actually, the percentage of PhD holders that believe conspiracy theories, as opposed to those who do not, is more or less the same as compared to other groups. So, say we have 8% of people that believe conspiracy theories that also have PhDs. So it's not an issue of education for sure. The research that we see is that it's an issue of curiosity, people trying to figure out why some things happen, and the conspiracy theories are in most cases using stuff that is difficult to debunk. That's what you cannot, for example, authoritatively say that there are no aliens. We haven't seen them, but there might be. So that leaves the field open to conspiracy theories, and everything around aliens can actually exist, because we don't have hard findings, hard data to say no, this is not true. So a lot of the thing about conspiracy theories is trying to find out an explanation of why certain things happen, and this is related to the brain wanting to have some sort of certainty of the world around it, because that brings comfort. Now, another important driver of conspiracy theory is distrust, where we have distrust in governments, distrust in science. That is a ripe field for conspiracists. An interesting way they propagate we almost never see a conspiracy theorist that only believes one conspiracy theory. It's usually a package. And the way it spreads, well, it's not exactly a viral model, but you subscribe to a particular theory. So first you become interested in something, you find a group on the internet that has similar beliefs, they bring more information to you, so become a bit more knowledgeable. This becomes like a group of your people. This is your gang. And within that group, when somebody mentions something else as a side interest, or a questionable thing, so a conspiracy theory that it's a nascent state, that fringe group actually moves almost as a whole to the new conspiracy theory. And that's not because they have the same level of belief in that. It's because people they trust also trust this one. So you're moving on the bandwagon effect. Other people are there, so you're joining there. Also the halo bias, which is you have a very high level of trust in someone, you respect them a lot. And when they tell you something, it means a lot to you, so you tend to believe. So when people who you trust and feel comfortable with move to another conspiracy theory, you move with them. I want to stick to the curiosity explanation. I find some positivism there, but it's very hard to argue a conspiracist. There's a lot of psychological research in that area. We cannot cover that. But that's the rest. You look for information and you distrust sources and that brings me to another issue. And as I speak, I will place in the chat something that we developed a few years ago. I would invite you, when you have time, just check that, scroll down. There's a graphical model and an explanation around it. I took note from what Kari said about reliability. And I want to put that again as a point of reflection. What is a reliable source in an oppressive state or in a dictatorship? And what is a reliable source for you as a person if you distrust mainstream media, public statistics, and government? So a lot of the ammunition, a lot of the armament, if you wish, that we initially thought we had, like it's so simple, you need to check it. And if you know, several reliable sources say it's true, then it's true. But the problem is you don't trust those sources. So it is true for us, because we might believe what the Guardian says, but for anyone on the fringe, that is exactly the opposite. So they would follow our suggestion, look for reliable sources. They would just have a different set of actors in the reliable sources category. Right. There was a question from Sandra, I believe, about do we copy disinformation tactics?
Yes. And are there any risks in this strategy?
And are there any risks with that? I think that's actually a philosophical debate, and it's a value-based thing. From my perspective, I can share what I believe in. I think we already do that. So disinformation, manipulation, deceit, this is not new. This is probably as old as humans exist, and actually way back, because we see that in nature too. We see chameleon changing their the way they look, changing their appearance to blend in the environment and be more successful in surviving. We use makeup. We put on perfume. We bring flowers to people. So we tend to do things that make us more appealing to others. So more agreeable, more trustworthy. Again, we bring flowers, we evoke emotions. We use all of that in our everyday life. So it is not new, and we definitely do it. What are the risks? I think the risks are mostly related to what kind of decisions we make based on information that is provided, and how impactful are our decisions on others. So is it just going to impact my own life, or am I passing it to my students? So a whole generation of higher education students, or am I making a decision for a company with 10,000 employees, or something like that? Propaganda has been there for ages. Deception and manipulation has been there for ages. It's risky. It's a matter of choice whether we want to go down to that level to fight it. I personally believe that the better way of doing it is to build awareness. If we can build awareness, if we can build resilience, that means that people would recognize the pattern of being manipulated and would be less susceptible to it. But I definitely don't think that it works if we just tell people this is true, this is false. So in my book, fact-checking needs a serious upgrade, just because it now preaches to the choir. Yeah, I think we should cut it. We don't have time. I know.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you. We don't have time because it's time for our coffee break. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again in 15 minutes or so. Thank you for the lecturers. It was a pleasure. Thank you again.
Yeah, also thank you so much for yourself, Bozhidar, Andy, Kari, and Federica. Yeah, we jump into a short break now. See everybody back at 15:15. Thank you.
Also, thanks to my panelist colleagues and to